Hi, I'm Sungwon Cho. You may know me as ProZD on the internet. Enjoy your bento, everyone.
Hey there, fellow nerds. Welcome into the Pop Culture Bento podcast. It's a single portion meal for your ears, filled with discussion about movies, TV, comics, video games, and the culture surrounding them. This is episode number 58, and I'm one of your co-hosts, Jack Russell. And joining me today, as usual, are my fellow co-hosts, Brad McGinnis.
Hey, hey.
Turning the hamster wheel over there, keeping the show going.
That was called a hamster. Okay, moving on.
And Justin Russell.
Hello.
And today we have returning guest, by popular demand, Dr. Hakkam Zaghmout. Hey, Hakkam.
Hello, I'm also here turning a hamster wheel.
Thank you for joining us today. He's here to talk about the Spider-Verse movie with us, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Oh my god, yes.
Oh man, I've been waiting all week for this.
So we'll be reviewing that at the bottom of the show. And in the entertainment news and notes, we'll be talking about the Hellboy trailer, the Men in Black International trailer, and maybe, if we have time, the Kingdom Hearts 3 stuff. So let's get into the entertainment news and notes. The entertainment news and notes is a segment where we step you through the newest and most notable happenings from the past week. So let's start off with the Hellboy trailer. So as you all know, a new movie is coming out. I assume this is a reboot, and I just wanted to get your guys' impressions because I never saw the original Hellboy. Was it a trilogy or a couple
I didn't see it
movies?
either, actually.
So it was Hellboy 1, Hellboy 2, and they were both directed by Guillermo del Toro, and they draw from the Dark Horse comics of Hellboy, and that's been actually has quite a long-running series. I don't know what the current status of the comics are, but it definitely, Hellboy's been a heavy hitter for them, and when it was brought to life, it was a character that no one had seen before. It did a nice balance between humor and the dark lore associated with it, and that's why I particularly loved it. There's a nice mix of like Lovecraftian horror and sort of almost supernatural espionage that goes on. And so the first two movies had Ron Perlman as the title character Hellboy, and he nailed it with the makeup job and everything, and it really transitioned to the big screen super well. But now, and I like the character design so far, Hellboy will be played by David Harbour, who's known for being the sheriff in Stranger Things. And that's the first role that I've seen him in.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so
cool.
they've got the look for Hellboy down, like
He's
the
got
actual
the body
character
type.
Yeah, so he's a red brick shithouse in the trailers. And
I love
it looks
that
like
Commodore song.
yes, and
He's a...
it looks like, so from the trailer so far, they didn't give a whole lot into the actual plot necessarily. They're rebuilding it from the ground up, and it's going to deal with supernatural elements and Hellboy fighting creatures, monsters, witches, all that jazz. That's what he's known for. And I like the backdrop, but it looks like the tone of the trailer so far, it's more about the humor and less of the horror. And I hope that's not going to be the case, because that was part of the charm of the original Hellboy movies. There was a bit of sense of dread and the supernatural going on, which was just fantastic enough to keep you captivated, but it wasn't so ridiculous that you thought, oh my God, this is just a freaking off the walls comic book movie.
Yeah, I don't think any of us have seen the first two. But
They're
I've heard
awesome.
the second one sort of described as sort of like a Western Miyazaki film, almost Ghibli-esque in its imagination. And of course, a lot of that can be attributed to Guillermo del Toro because he is such a imaginative, visual, and conceptual director. So, Brad, do you get the sense that they're sort of changing from that tone? Because it did look a lot more grounded, a lot more urban than stuff I've seen from previous previews and such from other movies.
It did, and just because for me, the Hellboy character, he was more, they went into the origin story, they did pretty well, and it gave him more of a gruff, misunderstood, tragic hero vibe, because of who he is. You see his right stone hand, he is destined to be the bringer of the apocalypse because of what he's inherited. So he has to deal with that tragic destiny, but while fighting for the good guys and being the protagonist. I'm not getting that much of a vibe on this one. It just seems like a guy that's saying I'm too old for this shit.
Yeah.
Or Hakkam, as you had mentioned before, like a Deadpool vibe. Just not taking.
It has this vibe of like this movie where it's the guy that shouldn't be the good guy. He's funny. He has these like one-liners here and there, and like I didn't see the first two, and I honestly don't think I'll see this one. Just based off the trailer, I doubt any of my friends will put it on when I'm over, so I might have to pass on this one.
And that's fair.
Yeah,
and sorry, Jack, you were going to say?
No, I was just going to echo that and say, if trailers are supposed to excite you or, get you to explore it further,
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I'll wait for streaming for this one, if at all.
Especially since Del Toro's not involved, and
I know
it looks totally, it kind of feels more influenced by the current slew of superhero movies. It's
Yeah,
got
I
kind
agree.
of
Meta.
it's kind of got like a Ragnarok vibe with the use of color and sort of the snappiness. So it looks more conventional than sort of like fantasy. So yeah, I don't know. I hope it's well received by fans of the series, but obviously, Brad might be the only one who is maybe slightly might enjoy it if it kind of reaches those expectations.
I'm optimistic, but I will, temper my expectations, and hopefully, I'm glad you said it, Justin, that it holds true to the fantasy elements, because that's always been the backbone of Hellboy. So we'll wait and see, but worst case scenario, even if this movie doesn't turn out to be amazing, we still have the original 2 Hellboy movies to watch. At the very least, you should absolutely watch the first one. And if that's to your liking, go for the second one. So we'll see how it pans out.
And so Hellboy is due out in theaters on April 12th, 2019. Moving on, we have the Men in Black International trailer. The movie title is Men in Black International, not the international trailer of a Men in Black movie. So, yeah, this one was a little more interesting to me than Hellboy, although, Hawk and I were watching it before the show started, and like you could, modern movie trailer cutting and marketing has become so predictable.
It's gotten so easy. It's just like, okay, so movie opens. It's a look at New York from a distance.
The establishing shot, yeah.
An establishing shot and a character who you wouldn't expect to be a character, like the lead character. Modern song playing in the background, usually Fergie, maybe like Biggie.
Wally.
Any sort of like song that kind of should make you feel like you were a badass when it came out, but not really anymore. And then like they have the buddy cop that is said to be good but isn't that good. You know what I mean? Like, and then you go on to this
you nailed
film.
that. You nailed
And
it.
it's just like I've seen this movie, and obviously not specifically this film in itself, but I've seen these movies over and over and over, and I get that it's a formula, and I get that they have to pump out a certain number of movies to keep the rights or whatever it is, but it's pretty obvious to me what this is. It's a normal cash grab film, which is fine. It's a capitalistic society. However, I'm not going to see it just based off the trailer. I think you mentioned actually, John. It's a Lexus commercial.
Well, I mean, like most action films, they always have like a deal of like, okay, this is the car that we're using for the movie. The Bond movies have like the Omega Seamaster Professional.
Black Panther had Audi.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I think so.
Or was
right?
it BMW? Wasn't it?
I thought it was Audi.
Yeah, it's probably Audi. I'm thinking, box office, this might not do too badly considering it's like literally a Thor Ragnarok Part 2 with the
featuring Lexus,
Tessa Thompson, and Chris Hemsworth. So and like Liam Neeson brings some intrigue there. I wonder what the depth of his involvement is.
Actually, I was happy to see him in the lineup. I never would have expected him to be in a Men in Black movie. So I'm more optimistic about this one because I know what I'm getting.
Do you think he's going to be a hard ass?
I kind of hope so.
Learns to soften up throughout the film.
Well, I just hope that I hope the aliens kidnap his daughter, and then that's the rest of the movie.
Listen, I don't know where you are in the universe. I don't know, Waka Waka. I trained.
Justin, I'm curious what your impressions were of this trailer.
I don't know. Men in Black was always, even back in the 90s, just sort of a light-hearted thing. So, in my opinion, as long as the chemistry is there between Tessa Thompson and Chris Hemsworth, they both look handsome in suits and they have good rapport. That's enough to make it successful to me. I'm not expecting too much out of it.
And I've got the memories from I love the original Men in Black 2, not so much Men in Black 3. The vibe felt different, and I might be in the minority here, but I watched the animated series as a kid. And I fucking loved it because it got into some territory that the movies couldn't. I mean, part sci-fi, alien space thriller, even body horror at times. So that was really pretty
Yeah.
wild for a cartoon. And so I would love to see that be brought back in some shape or form in a new series before a new Men in Black movie. But who knows? This thing could blow my expectations out of the water, but I'm not naive enough to believe that 100%.
It's too bad they couldn't get Will Smith back, but I think he's doing that genie
He's
film.
the genie for Aladdin.
Oh
And,
boy,
like,
that's a whole
you see
nother
that?
can of
I've
worms
never
that we
seen
can't
such
go
a
into.
mix of like reactions to something.
It's very polarizing.
It was super polarizing because like a lot of people wanted him to be blue for it, and it was
That's
like a
smart.
listen, man.
Oh, that one's gonna be that's gonna be an episode later. But yeah. Ooh.
So, Men in Black International is due out in theaters June 14th, 2019. So please look forward to it.
I won't.
All right. So the last thing we have here in the news and notes is the Kingdom Hearts 3 story. So the game has leaked 6 weeks before the release. It's due out in late January of next year, and apparently one of the people like stole it from like a shipping warehouse because it had gone gold like a couple weeks ago. So
Right. It was like a
from there-
logistics worker.
Dude, their body is gonna show up in the bay very soon.
Yeah, so there's a huge because Kingdom Hearts is a very like it or love it. It's a strong culty fan base.
It's kind of a religion at this point.
Yeah, so they actually came out with like a united front, led by Nomura, the director of the game, and he took to Twitter to say, hey, we realize the game has been leaked early. We hope that influencers and outlets and channels don't propagate the material, and we kind of like don't ruin the surprise. And they also took the step of they're saying, hey, the final cutscene and like the final movie at the end is going to be patched in day one as like not a DLC but like a day one patch thing, so it's not like completely spoiled before the launch,
Like
so.
secret endings and such.
Exactly, which he said
All
was
10 of
the
them.
most spoiler heavy thing. So I don't know if you all are as much of a Kingdom Hearts fans as my partner, but
And Jack, I am to a point where I love Kingdom Hearts, but I do not know what the hell is going on anymore.
Yeah.
I will openly admit that. I need a Charlie-esque flowchart like in the episode of It's Always Sunny, the Pepe Sylvia shit to figure out what's going on now.
Disney fans get something, anime fans get something. It's an intersection of the two.
Hey man, if you're an anime fan, you love how convoluted this shit
Well,
is.
the big part of the buzzkill is the fact that Kingdom Hearts 3 was announced back at E3 like 2013, and it's been so long, even before that, there are several years when we didn't even know that we're going to get a third one. So the fact that so close to the finish line, literally 6 weeks
Oh, dude, I
beforehand, it
know.
gets leaked fully. I mean, that's just got to
Yeah.
be the biggest buzzkill ever.
And I'll note that they did have to overhaul the engine somewhere in the development, so it didn't take like
Right.
6 years to do it. It was more like 3 or 4 because they overhauled it.
Yeah, but not even development, just like in the cultural mindshare, people are just clamming for that.
People have been waiting for so long, and it's just like really unfortunate.
Frothing at the
for this to
mouth, yeah,
happen.
it's gotten dangerous.
Yeah, and today, before I move on, today an interesting development. We're recording this on the 21st. The Kingdom Hearts Twitter like went down, like twitter.com/Kingdom Hearts, like it's gone right now, and people are like, the memes
God.
following it's so funny because they're like, oh, the Kingdom Hearts Twitter got Norded, or like the Heartless have taken over it or whatever. But people are suspecting that maybe it's like a like a hacker took it over and just like deleted the account or something to mess with it. I don't know. It's weird.
It's a lot of stuff.
But yeah, hopefully that gets resolved. Kingdom Hearts 3, January 29th, 2019. Try to dodge the spoilers and keep the good faith. That's it for the entertainment news and notes. How about we move on to our omakase section, our chef's choice segment. All right, so omakase, or chef's choice, is a segment where we serve up our latest recommendations. So I'll kick it off briefly. Let's talk about. I don't think we talked about Super Smash Bros. Ultimate yet, since it's come out on the show. So I know we've had like Smash and Pizza Night already, and
It was awesome.
We've kind of been playing it here and there. So I just wanted to get your guys' impressions. Like, how does it stack up to all the ones you've played before, and how fun is it? How not fun is it? What do you think?
It reminded me of the days of playing Super Smash Bros. When we were still in college, duking it out. Some of the best times I've ever had playing Smash Bros. And that just brought back all those memories, minus the frustration of trying to coordinate all the controllers on the console. That was almost nightmare fuel. But we got past that. We came together as a group. We defeated the enemy, and we had a glorious time. It's a fucking fun game.
That's more of a Switch issue than the game issue, but
right,
yeah,
it is.
I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah,
but
it's like one of those things that you always know when you get together with your friends and you play Smash. It's gonna be fun, and very, very rarely have I ever played Smash with my friends and been like, okay, I'm bored. You know what I mean? Like,
agreed. Yeah, I've never had that going on.
It's a ridiculous amount of characters. 74.
Jesus.
So, like, you put it in random, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, how can I get bored of this? And there's just so much variety and different characters, different moves, different, defenses. It's just so much fun. It's basically the same game, though, with the added characters.
Justin, what did you think with your time with Smash?
Yeah, definitely. I didn't get a chance to explore all of the, for example, single player campaign features or other special modes, but the main Smash formula is there. It's pretty much the exact same thing as, say, Brawl or Melee. No slipping this time, so that's good.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I hated that.
But a huge roster, a lot of interesting names, and a lot of names that I didn't really know, which, I don't know, there are probably fans out there of those characters that will like to use them. But I tend to stick to the main, like Link and Marth are my guys,
Yeah.
So I will say that playing an 8-man was not really fun for me. I mean, really,
it's hard to keep track of everything.
I don't blame you. No, that was. I mean, you couldn't see your character half the time.
For me, it's got to be no items. It's got to be the flat Omega stages, which I love that they added an option for that and sort of streamlined, sort of the options menu so that you can turn off items and pick certain stages in a specific way, which is nice.
And do it blindfolded. That's the only proper way to play Smash.
Right. So, apart from some quality of life improvements, it's pretty much the same. I am pissed that they changed Link's down B the bomb because his projectile game is so important for sort of map control. And now having to press down B again to detonate the bomb after throwing the bomb is really annoying and throws off my comboing. So right now I've been sticking with Marth. Thankfully, he feels liquid smooth. But I do want to sort of explore some of the other character options and see if there might be someone who's really good. So just really, it's the same game, just on steroids again. I mean, if Brawl was Melee on steroids, then this is Brawl on steroids.
We actually all noticed that, like, as we played, John was on the left shooting projectiles, Justin was on the right, and it was always
they were
those two at the
coordinated
very
A-holes.
end, and you can tell they've been playing it for years together. Because, like, it's just like an in-sync dance together, and then someone just gets smashed off the map.
Well, it's because I don't have a death wish. That's how you do it. You gotta kind of like play the edges, and
you gotta make a deal under the table before you ever start.
It's not a
playing.
deal under the table. It's just your Darwinian survival instinct. I'm just trying to avoid them.
We played 3-on-3. We had the guy on the edge. So I had Samus, and I was like loading him up. The person in front of me had constant projectiles, and then we had like a tank. I think ours was Bowser.
Yeah, Bowser or Donkey Kong.
Or King Dedede, just like in the center, just taking hits.
That was surprisingly fun. Because usually it's like team battle, it's kind of like, okay, everything's kind of random, you're just kind of hitting people every opportunity you can get. But we really hone into like team roles, sort of like Overwatch, where you're picking certain characters and their abilities and sort of creating a meta and trying to strategize with your team.
Yeah, who would have thought a little strategy actually works?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you're loading up Samus and like they're trying to infiltrate and someone gets in.
Someone
you know what I mean? And you just get destroyed because like you've been loading up this
the front lines are gone.
Help! Help!
So yeah, it's another hit. I think we all highly recommend it if you have a Switch, so go ahead and get that.
Agreed.
I will say before we move on that my one criticism, because I stupidly hosted an event on the launch day. Like, it was the Friday evening that it launched, and I took the day off work, woke up at 8 a.m. to start unlocking these characters.
With an alarm.
Yeah, and so there's 74 characters to unlock. You start with the original, was it 10 or 12 that Smash N64 had? But the rest of them you have to unlock, and there's like a 10-minute gate between every character you can unlock on top of the other conditions it takes to unlock them. So it literally took me like 12 hours to unlock like everyone.
Yeah.
And it was so annoying. I wish they had, because I had played Wii U Smash, and so I wish that those characters you already have, I don't want to unlock them again. I know how they play, and just unlock like the 12 brand new characters that came with Switch. I thought that was very tedious, and
Jack, not all heroes wear capes. Well done.
yeah, thankfully I made
Some
it
of them
in time,
wear
but...
cardigans and jeans.
Yeah, they should just make it so that there's the full list, and then you have to challenge that. Like, you can challenge them at any time and then beat them once, and just make it available instead of sort of time gating it in this random encounter thing.
Yeah, but have them at like a 9. You know what I mean? Like, you have to like.
They had to patch that actually a week after launch. They're like, everyone was complaining like on Twitter, hey, the computers are too hard when they're challenging you, and there are too many sword users. And they're like, oh, you can fix one of those, and then
And they fixed neither.
Yeah. Okay. So
My quick thing. So this manga's been out for a while. It's called basically Rise of the Shield Hero, and think of it as being isekai, but you're dropped in a world of assholes, and so the main character is actually looked at as almost the antagonist from the very get-go, and he has to go through like an entire sea of bullshit just to be able to get things rolling in his favor and to make the isekai world work out for him. But the best part is it's now getting an anime. I'm stupidly excited, so I'll see how that works out.
Justin, let's move on to your recommendations. What have you been up to?
Yeah, super briefly, Red Dead Redemption 2, I finished the main story. I'm trying to 100% it. Absolutely incredible. It's not super innovative, but it is the absolute peak and above that of writing and presentation. Play that if you haven't. I saw Shoplifters, which is a Japanese film. It was very limited, so I was lucky enough to see it in the US. It won the Palme d'Or at Cannes this year, which is cool. And it is a very interesting look at family and sort of two opposing views of family. Shoplifters is about kids who shoplift and a family who shoplifts.
I'd be disappointed if it wasn't.
Yeah, and they're this band of non-related people who form this family and survive because they're very poor from shoplifting, right? And it's really interesting because the sort of concept of ownership with the products that they steal sort of extends to the fact that they're picking up these straggling people and sort of assimilating them into this weird ragtag family. But then it gets so incredibly nuanced, and worldviews are challenged in a really interesting way, and definitions of family are challenged, and sort of lineage and death are explored. It's a really interesting look at that dynamic. So if that sounds interesting, take a look at that. And I saw Roma, which I know has been like critically doing very well. It's on Netflix. Go ahead and watch Roma because I highly, highly recommend it. But I think I'll talk about Roma next week for the sake of time.
All right, very good. And lastly, let's bring it over to Hakkam. Anything you're recommending this week?
To be honest, I've been trying to scramble to like think of something as you guys were going down your recommendation list. But no, for now, I don't think I have much. I'd just say I'd back your guys's, especially Super Smash Brothers. And anyone that's into Rise of Shield Hero.
I might not be the weeb you deserve, but I'm the weeb you need.
Get that on a shirt, the weeb you need.
But honestly, I'm just crazy excited to talk about Spider-Verse. I've been waiting.
Oh yeah, we all are.
Okay, let's get straight into that then. Let's get into our feature discussion, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse review. Per Pop Culture Bento fashion, we're going to do the non-spoiler portion of the show first, to do that briefly, talk about our impressions and recommendations, and then we'll get into the spoiler analysis where we deep dive into it for those of you who have seen it and want a little bit more out of the viewing experience. So without further ado, here we go. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. The IMDb description is Miles Morales becomes a Spider-Man of his reality and crosses paths with his counterparts from other dimensions to stop a threat to all reality. And so this was directed by Bob Perischetti and Peter Ramsey, and written by Phil Lord, Rodney Rothman. Huge cast, like it's loaded. Chris Pine, Nick Cage,
Nick
Jake Johnson.
Friggin' Cage. Just stop, pause, and let that register for a second, then we can move on.
The same guy from Mandy. is here.
The national
now
treasure is in this movie.
He's
I never thought I'd say this, but Nicolas Cage is one of my favorite Spider-Mans.
You think so?
Yeah.
You ripped that line from me, you a-hole, but that's okay. We're moving on.
I'm on the same page with you, man.
Fair enough. I could roll that.
Oh man, so we were talking about it before we came on the air, and we were talking about like the movies that came out this year, and in my opinion, this actually might be the best movie I saw all year. It's hard to say because Black Panther did come out in February, which was this year, which is kind of insane to think about. But in terms of watching a movie from beginning to end and not wanting it to end and wanting it to be 2 more hours long.
Yep.
This was the best movie I've seen.
Yeah, this movie absolutely is a very strong contender for a movie, especially best animated movie of the year. And speaking of, you want to talk about the animation. I have never seen anything quite like this in a movie. It was able to balance the comic book effects that you would think, like the thought bubbles, the text, speeches floating in the air.
And the frames.
And the frames, and you could definitely tell because of how things were. Some of the images in the movie almost looked like they were fuzzy. I know that was deliberate, and it's definitely a movie if you can see it in 3D, because I think that's how it's meant to be seen. But you're not missing out if you don't. And the animation styles between the characters themselves, that's awesome because it breaks down that they're different. And they're all each unique. And I was just blown away. I did not want to stop looking at this. If I could not have blinked throughout that entire movie, I would have kept my eyelids just stretched open the whole time.
Orange style, just like taking eye drops as it goes. Like, Brad, you don't have to do this.
Make an apparatus before you go in this movie. Keep your eye holes open, and then just occasionally moisturize them.
Yeah,
that is
definitely.
actually the medical term for eyelids.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of the presentation and the animation itself, I completely agree. It's a really great justification of the different styles because of the interdimensionality of the whole premise, right?
Yep,
and
that's
the
a
fact,
$5 word.
the fact that there's like playing with different refresh rates or the FPS of the animation itself. Sometimes it's choppy, but like it's purposely choppy, right? And then sometimes it's smooth, and sometimes it looks almost 3-dimensional, or there's some depth to it, and sometimes it looks completely flat. They play around with all these different styles just because they can, just because it's their playground, just because the concept permits that. So I find that to be a lot of fun. But even from a storytelling perspective, it is so good with setups and payoffs that are meaningful.
It's an origin story, but it doesn't feel like the hashed out, redone superhero origin story at all. And that's coming from me, who's seen almost every origin story under the sun via comics and the comic book movies. Boy, was it refreshing.
And that's the great thing, is that because of the nature of being able to rehash origin stories throughout, that actually provides a really wonderful structure for the movie to sort of give this pre-programmed or mathematical structure to the movie that makes sense both from the structure, but also meaningfully to the characters themselves. They give each character their stakes in a similar way, but sort of like they rhyme with each other, if you know what I mean, right? Yeah. So they fulfill all of those promises really well throughout the movie. So from a storytelling perspective, as well as a presentation perspective, it's just successful on every level. It's really incredible.
And I want to give a shout out to, I really want to hone in on the idea that it was a brilliant move making Miles the central protagonist of the movie, because it's a Spider-Man that not everyone is acquainted with. I mean, he's been around for quite some time, but he did not originate in the main Marvel universe that we call home in the comics. He was actually quite controversial at the time when he came out. He came out during the Ultimate Universe, or Earth 1610. And in that universe, crap, I don't want to pull that one because it's kind of spoilers to the movie. You guys know what I'm talking about, but it happened in the Ultimate. Okay, I'll save that part. So Miles Morales is a Spider-Man of that universe, and he's a character that is fresh when he first starts off. I mean, the idea of Spider-Man is known in that universe. So in a way, he does have shoes to fill, especially in the superhero community. It's already well established, and they bring it home. It doesn't feel like a standard comic origin story like that you can't relate to at all. It's grounded, but it keeps the superhero elements like pretty close. Like if you were a kid that got bitten by a radioactive spider. What the hell are you going to do? And the Miles story plays out pretty well in that regard.
Yeah, so sort of what I'm hearing from, your pool of knowledge from previous works in the comics are much broader than us three. But what I'm hearing is that the adaptation of it is really genius because it simultaneously has its own voice, but also draws from a rich history.
Yeah,
right?
and I think that's what comic book movies should do.
Yeah.
Use the source material as well as you can, but don't tell the exact same story coming to the big screen. And I've had to reconcile that with myself because I do want to see something new, but at the same time, it does hold true to the source material. And that kind of balancing act, it's not easy, but the movie did that in a beautiful way, especially with all the characters that are in it.
It's to be honest, it's as cliche as it sounds. I think representation does matter, and to make a big film and make the main character black was just like it's great, and it's something I do like to see, and I do like to see that going forward. And it's such a different film, you know what I mean? But it's different in the fact that it works. Like everything, I think every risk they took actually feels like it paid off. It was the first time I'd seen something like this, and I've recommended it to everyone I know.
Yep.
I don't see movies often in the theaters a second time. I think the last time was Avengers 1. But if someone suggested to see this in IMAX, I would 100% be down. Oh yeah, this seems like so much fun to see, especially in like IMAX, that I might actually like make a weekend of this or a day.
Yeah, I won't disagree with your point that representation matters, but I think one of the core strengths is the universality of what can be applied to each of these characters and what it means to everyone. So I do think it is relatable to anyone, and that's a good thing for society at large.
Yeah.
Well, and the writing is extremely well done, and the characters are fleshed out in a great way, considering where they all came from, the backdrop and everything, and the challenge that they have to deal with. It's just so representation is awesome. But if the setup and the overall like plot story structure was stale, it would have only gone so far.
That's true.
Yeah, and for me, where this movie sort of lives in my brain right now from a structural or stylistic standpoint, it's like Pixar-esque storytelling with their sort of manipulation of setups and payoffs and really solid storytelling. Except if you crank that up the dial to like 20, just the pure kineticism of the animation is something that you don't, I feel like Pixar is very classic. They borrow more from like classic Disney in their pace, but I feel like this is a lot more modern, a lot more hip, and just like it just moves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, and I just wanted to throw in a note about the soundtrack really goes well with the various scenes in the movie, and it keeps up the flow and just the hype throughout. So
and it is
that was
very
something
New
I don't
York
want to.
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the last thing I mentioned this earlier. One of my biggest complaints usually in movies is the soundtrack, because sometimes I feel like it takes me out of it. And we've laughed about this before. You're ruining my immersion. Like you're breaking my immersion. Like, oh, there was a thread on Reddit about like which character would you kill off instantly if you could from something and make it better. And the first answer was Charlie Sheen. Not Charlie Sheen. Not Charlie Sheen.
What movie?
Ed Sheeran. Ed Sheeran in Game of Thrones. And that was such a, when I saw that in Game of Thrones, dude, you see him for 15 seconds. So like, immersion means a lot to people. And the music of films, when it's a very modern movie, when it's they tend to blast a modern song, and that just kind of takes me out of it. But this one kind of felt like the music matched with the pace, with how the film was going.
And I do think that you can be a little more obvious or risky with a soundtrack in a movie as conceptually diverse as this, because the mediumness of the movie is pulling both visually and conceptually from comics. So they're playing with words on the screen visually, and they're playing with frames. So they're already pointing out the mediumness of it. So having a soundtrack that sticks out a little bit is not going to be as noticeable, because you know what you're getting into. You're sort of ready for a really media experience rather than trying to be fully immersed.
Speaking of the soundtrack, the one bit I wanted to add is that the Spider-Man game that just came out recently, Marvel Spider-Man for PlayStation 4.
Yeah.
The entirety of that game was so awesome when I played it. But now compared to like this, I know there are different types of it's a movie versus a game, but like now it just makes that game seem so like uninspired and like derivative, and like okay, the music was literally, when you're swinging around, it was like
Avengers theme song,
literally just
the score was really disappointing in that one.
I respectfully disagree with you saying it's like derivative. They tell different stories.
Yeah, they're different.
They're different
I'd say
experiences.
that the video game was much more the 2000s run of the Tobey Maguire and
Sam
Sam Raimi
Raimi,
ones.
Which they just
I don't
added.
think that takes away from it, but that does feel a lot more classic in
Yeah,
comparison
it
to
is.
this.
Yeah, it's meant to be the more classic feel.
Yeah.
So they're both good. They're both amazing in their own way.
But tonally, I think
I
a lot
think
of that can
also-
be attributed to the Sony-ness of it, because of course Sony did the original Spider-Man run with Raimi, and also they did the PlayStation one, of course. So
Yeah. And I think like also John played the game, then played a little bit more, and then he watched me play like most of the way through. And so like he probably has heard that song and the music and
Yeah.
like the web slinging and the story like 3-4 times. Then he sees something new like this and is just like, that sucked.
No, I stand by it. Like, there's no.
Well, you're wrong.
It didn't have character.
You're wrong.
It was so stylish and it had so much like interesting personality and character.
I have
was
3
like,
points towards that, and all 3 of them are that you're absolutely.
okay, I will say, and not to make this a review on the Spider-Man video game or anything, but I just want to say, just imagine if there was a soundtrack that was sticking out that much. Do you really think that would work on a 100+ hour experience? You know, for video games, video game music has to be so procedural and have to loop because a player has agency, and you don't know how long an event is going to take. So really, a more classic score that is more ambient works a lot better than this fast hip hop score, where in a movie you have so much more direction and control over timing of the music. Where if that kind of music was like just looping for 30 minutes in the background of a fight,
God, yeah.
that would be that might be really really tiresome.
Yeah,
That's a good
I see what
point.
you're saying. I agreed. Yeah.
And before we go, I think we're getting to like the spoilers. I just want to say the humor in the movie,
Yeah.
combined with it's top notch. It's just it flows with the story. Nothing makes you go, oh man, that was a terrible joke. No,
Yeah.
it's all just on point. Matches with the characters, matches with the themes, the setting, the flow of the movie, and you'll have your adrenaline pumping while you're laughing, and it just goes back and forth.
Like very last point about this from me is that going into it, I was like, oh, how are they going to make a movie PG and have it be good? And
I
don't
know,
think,
right?
I don't think it being PG pulled away anything from, you know, having it feel like a relatable, you know, film.
Yeah.
You know, they weren't like substituting curse words. They weren't like, you know, you didn't feel like, oh, no one's going to die because it's PG.
Yeah, the story didn't
know?
need that extra, you know. It was universal
13.
enough to work for whoever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is like a top 3 superhero movie for me of all time.
Absolutely.
It's like
Yeah.
Dark
Yeah.
Knight, Logan. This is like really great
wow.
company.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
wow. Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
it's
actually,
it's like a top-
not bad,
It's hard
Justin.
to argue with that.
It's like a top
Yeah.
20 movie, not only superhero movie, but top 20 movie of like the last 5 years for me. So really incredible movie.
Yeah, I don't want to get too sidetracked, but when I watched Logan, I was supposed to be somewhere, and I was like, oh, I'll watch the first 10 minutes of this movie, and I was an hour, 50 minutes late. Because I was like, well, I'm not
Worth
going to
it.
stop watching this. This is an incredible film.
Yeah, tonally, it's
But, yeah.
completely different from The Dark Knight and Logan. So I
Yeah.
think for what it's going for, it might be the best at what it's going for, you know?
Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
think that's a perfect point to shift into spoiler territory now.
Absolutely. So, you know, here we go. Spoilers for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. You have been warned.
This movie's so good. Oh my god. So just the way it flows and having, you know, so we're in the spoilers now. I hope nobody fast forwarded, but having Spider-Man
Yeah,
die,
don't be those people.
having Spider-Man die within the first 10 to 15
Dude,
minutes.
I didn't know
I
that
didn't
was going to
expect
happen.
that even 1%. I thought this guy was going to mentor him. I thought he was going to kind of like go the
Well,
conventional route, and then all of a sudden he's glassed by Fisk.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
because we didn't know that the age, like the seasoned Peter in the trailers was not. You know,
Yeah.
you knew it was a part of the universe, but we didn't realize there was already a native Spider-Man to the universe, like the
Yeah, they didn't
OG
reference it,
Peter
so it came out of
Parker.
nowhere, yeah.
And I believe he was voiced by Chris Pratt, and he shows up in the beginning when he's duking it out with Green Goblin, which was inspired by the ultimate version of Green Goblin. And
Yeah.
this storyline actually plays out pretty close to Miles' home universe. In that universe, the Peter Parker, he's a teenager then, but he does die, and Miles, he's filling in the shoes of Peter Parker. And actually, a lot of people were against it at the time, both in the comics and the reader, the readers in the real world, because like, holy crap, this is just some. I mean, a lot of people were just pissed like that Peter died, and then they were just throwing in a black kid for whatever reason. But he was so much more than that as time went on, and I'm happy that Marvel took that chance. So that idea is reflected in the movie. And it hit me pretty hard when that version of Peter just like died on screen. I thought he'd just be incapacitated and maybe like swing in the last scene. It's like, hey guys, I'm not dead. I'm gonna help you out.
He was 6 feet. No,
he was slammed
MJ was
by
on
Kingpin.
MJ was like on Bumble, just like looking for someone else, like looking for local superhero. But yeah, not to nitpick, but I think earlier you said Chris Pratt. It's actually Chris Pine was the.
Sorry, Chris Pine, my mistake.
Yeah. But like for me, the casting was excellent too. You know, you bring in the Spider-Man from essentially our universe. And, you know, he's kind of a deadbeat in a sense, and he's trying to get his life together. He can't. Well,
he's hit a bout of depression
it's
after
Jake Johnson, you know. And I don't know if you guys have ever watched New Girl. It was essentially the same character. If you take Nick from New Girl and make him Spider-Man, that was exactly who was in that film. Takes a shower with his suit on. He's having a lot of trouble. He gets a date once every few months, but like, you know, he can't. You know, he's not thoughtful. And having John Mulaney there was just so funny.
Oh my god! Kind of like every scene he was in, it was always like counteracted by the Nick Cage Spider-Man Noir. Like the hard-boiled, of, like the rapid fire one after the other. Was,
I like burning matches.
That's a really smart choice.
It's my finger so I can feel it, and I like eating pie.
No, he's like,
but it can get weirder.
Yeah, they're saying their abilities, and he's like, "Can you float in the air when you smell delicious pie?" I love that because it plays on that like classic Acme trope. It's like so genius.
Yeah,
and
the Looney Tunes
very much John Mulaney's
style.
humor, anyways. So I love that, and everything that you guys are saying is strengthened by the fact that it all revolves around the central concept. That's why the concept is so genius of this interdimensionality. Is that you were talking about the death of the original Spider-Man, and you were talking about the fact that there are different like awesome voice actors that can play these different Spider-Men, you know, or Spider-Woman. So
Spider people,
and that
actually,
all revolves around the fact that like they can have these like different origin stories, and they're like, okay, this time this is really the last one. I'm Spider-Man, and then I'm from New York.
Last one.
Blah blah blah, right? And they kept doing that, and it could be played for jokes, but also affords emotional clarity as well, because like I said, the structure rhymes with each other, right? It's like, for one of the Peters, it's his relationship with MJ breaks down, and it's the issue with children. He didn't want children, right?
Yep.
That is then set up there, and then
which is a legitimate concern when you've been bitten by a radioactive spider. Just saying,
right? But then that rhymes with the structure of Gwen's problem, where they each have like that thorn in their side, right? Hers is her complicated relationship with friendship, and that's the specific sacrifice that she had to have. So,
well, I was going to touch on that. I believe her Peter was actually the Lizard in her universe, and he had to die because just circumstance.
Yeah, so they each had their thorns in their side. And the fact that they were being able to be set up in those origin little like intricate origin stories and then later fulfilled really sort of uncovers that emotional clarity from that structure. And usually you think like, oh, sort of this fast film that with a lot of ideas, it needs to have free form structure because it's so exciting. But the fact that it's sort of counterintuitive that the more structure you have, the more clarity that you can gain from that.
That's a really good point.
And also, like, it's just such a quotable film, you know, like, like we've been quoting it since we saw it, and like Nicolas Cage, like Spider-Man Noir in the middle of the living room being like, this is a gnarly origin story, and like just doubling down on the meta, just like, oh,
here's a hammer,
fit
in your pocket.
Here's a
it's
hammer,
perfect.
it'll fit in your pocket. He just looks at him. We're like, that's all, folks. Can he say that?
Can he legally say that?
Yeah, it does have a very meta, self-aware.
And you know where that comes from. Part of it is knowing what these characters are about. You can't be plucking these alternate universe versions of Peter and Gwen and what they're doing unless you have read their comics to a degree and understand what their stories are. So that's awesome. And that's also great that they didn't put too many other spider people in here because that would have been a giant clusterfuck.
Yeah, they showed some restraint.
Yeah, it was a good balance.
Until they got to the credits and they just unleashed like every Spider-Man idea they had.
And hey, the spider people are great, but also I think the villains were top notch.
Oh yeah.
I did not expect them to go with a female version of Doc Ock. That was awesome. That was brilliant.
Yeah, that caught me off guard. I was like, oh, you know, they actually referenced that in a sense. They said, oh, the head scientist has it on their computer, and he looks at this guy.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's the girl. He goes, oh, okay, so I'm going to take her computer, but also I'm going to reevaluate my biases. And so you go into it, and you're thinking, like, in your mind, you've never seen a female Doc Ock, and then all of a sudden this is Doc Ock. So they get you again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
And and that's
called their
actually
shot.
like really. it's really unnerving when she just, she casually just takes off her coat and the friggin' tentacles come out. It's like,
her
oh god.
bloodthirst was unnerving. Yeah.
And the fact that you brought up that scene, and that was during a that Mission Impossible-esque hypothetical breaking in planning thing, but he's talking within the frame of that hypothetical scene. So that is another example of framing the meta, that I really love. I was talking about Pixar earlier in non-spoilers, and sort of it has some Pixar logic in terms of specifically like The Incredibles. It has very superhero logic with specifically talking about Miles's powers, because his two powers are that he turns invisible, and that
his two differentiating powers. He has all the standard
standard Spider-Man
stuff,
and then
but
every
then the
other Spider-Man
camouflage-
has their power, but specifically for Miles, it's that he's invisible and he has lightning,
Venom
right?
Blast.
Or whatever electricity thing that is. And that works in a very comic book logic way, because it is like cool that those are superpowers, but in the same way that Violet in The Incredibles was invisible because of sort of her social thing in high school, that she can feel invisible. Well,
she didn't want
Miles
to be seen.
Miles had the exact same thing where he felt invisible to either, maybe it's his family life, or maybe it's his place in the world or college or whatever thing, right? Then that contrasts really well with the fact that the electricity is his spark, the spark that his father was talking about when he was talking about through the door at the dormitory, right?
Justin, I think you gave a better rationale for those powers than they did actually in the comics when he got them.
Yeah, the spark. So were those already set up for Miles?
They were. Those
wow.
were, and the only justification, I forget the reason for, is because that spider was different that bit him, so they can. That's kind of a blanket thing for we can give him whatever the hell.
So
we
that's
want.
a really incredible sort of reworking of that to make it thematically consistent. Because it's not even me. Like, it's the filmmakers. That was so intentional because the spark represents his potential, and realizing your potential is the theme of the whole movie, right?
Yeah.
So I think contrasting those two powers against each other is quite frankly genius. It works in a very Incredibles way.
I can't take too much credit as well.
I want to point out the villain that I was actually very happy about, and I knew about his identity prior because they take that from the comics as well. But the Prowler being Miles' uncle.
Oh, that was intense.
That was cool.
The freaking sound effects that came on whenever he was doing his pursuit thing, I got chills.
I honestly
was a little haunted.
I thought it was a bad guy Spider-Man from somewhere else.
He
had the same
cool.
kind of eyes.
Yeah.
But then, it also, it loops back to the uncle that he trusted, and it kind of gives you that. Yeah. And
he was a tech-based villain. He had the gauntlets, the visor, the boots, so it gave him enhanced abilities. And I'm glad they were able to incorporate that as the tragic element of Miles' origin story, as opposed to having another Uncle Ben. That would have just been too much.
But yeah, dude, I also liked it was the first time we had seen a Spider-Man realistically come into his powers. The Spider-Mans, all the movies, he always goes up to the highest building and decides, you know what, I'm going to jump off. And, that's not how any of us would react to these powers.
Yeah.
I would jump off.
No, we would stand very close to the ground and do some trial runs.
I would potentially go to the balcony, maybe. But this guy's and he goes up to the building and he's like, okay, I can do this, and he doesn't, and it makes sense,
Yeah, because he's not a madman.
Yeah, he's not insane. If I had to say one thing, just to find one thing that I didn't like about the movie, it was just that it seemed like at one point he just got really good with his powers. All of a sudden, he could web sling, electricity, and go invisible all together, and just because it clicked for him. But I get it. I get eventually he had to get good with the powers.
Yeah.
It's just that that he struggled with them for 95% of the movie, and all of a sudden he's a pro.
Well, that's very comic book logic, because it's more so representing his spiritual or mental state, right?
Rising to the occasion.
Right. Yeah.
I'm with you on that, Hakkam. I could see that too.
Yeah, it sort of forgoes that realistic logic just to sort of represent what that means.
Yeah. There's a ham with spider powers, and that's what you got to find, Hakkam.
Listen, man, I'm talking about the storytelling. If you guys had to pick your favorite Spider-Man, who would it be?
Oh, Noir. Definitely.
Really?
Yeah, I think Noir was incredible. Yeah.
Noir pairing was really
I love.
I want a Noir.
I thought he was the funniest.
I want a Noir Spider-Man movie, and also the introduction where you actually saw a few seconds of the Noir world. Like,
Dude, the noir world
it
is
was
pretty.
so
It's wild.
the visuals and just like his old man sayings that Brad might pull out sommes.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
Like,
That's why it
I love
resonated with
that,
me.
dude. So
He's
cool.
like,
I like punching Nazis. And I like. And then this isn't even mentioning. We haven't even mentioned like the female Spider-Man that often. Like what did they call her?
Spider. Well, Spider. We can call her Spider Gwen, and then Penny Parker with her awesome mech spider.
And
Penny Parker.
Yeah, she was like, her character was so good. And then there was the Japanese anime one where I felt like it was so funny. Like, out of nowhere.
And that's great because she is mentioned in the comics, but it's part of the Spider-Verse event where they all come from different universes. And they tweak the design of her mech a little bit because in the comics, it's more like one of the Avas from Evangelion, but here they make it more like a toned down cute pod. Yeah.
It's more like a Diva from Overwatch or Big Hero 6.
Yeah, 100%.
And it makes you think, like, what other Spider-Mans are there? Like, Spider-Man Will Sebastian.
I can tell you, Hakkam.
Oh.
Just take 2 hours out of your day and I'll
we
go
stayed
through
after
it.
the movie. We saw.
We did, and I gotta tell you, I would have loved him in the main cast, but I'm glad they threw him at the end because it makes sense in context with what he's done in the comics before. Friggin' Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099. He's just Spider-Man in the future. He's just a badass, and that opens the door for so many more possibilities.
Well, I also love the fact that like now because you introduce a reason for selective like volunteer time travel, I suppose, or like what like time
dimension travel.
Yeah, dimensional travel on demand.
Now it's time and dimension travel. Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey.
Yeah, but that gives a justification for like Spider-Gwen and Miles to meet again, or the Peter Parker of the other dimension to meet them so they can be buddy again instead of having to have like a tearful goodbye at the end.
Yeah.
Hakkam, you even said it. Like you were hoping that Penny Parker made like a social media site for multi-dimensional
Spider-Mans and like messaging each other and like, hey, there's a spider event in this dimension, and you put down
you guys come over,
like nothing changes really. You know what I mean? Like you're still not gonna go to things just because like it's a Spider-Man Facebook, but like a spider like Instagram would do something cool. Spider Venmo.
So we were talking about the sort of like animatedness of it and how kinetic and fun it was. And I think it works in a lot of different ways. It works in like action ways. For example, there's that scene in Aunt May's house when they're duking it out, a bunch of the villains and the spider people. And there's that one like little few second thing where Aunt May looks at the four corners of the comic book panels, top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right. And then each time she looks, like the Brady Bunch thing, like a new action happens. And like that's just fun in an action way, but then in an emotional way as well. Because for example, the animatedness allows the moment with Miles and his dad when Miles is wrapped up in his chair back to back against the wall. And they're talking, well, you can see them both at the same time on the screen with the wall sort of bisecting the screen.
That was very well done.
Because I think that lands on you visually and emotionally in a different way if it's just like reverse shot of just like close up on his face while he's talking, close up on his face while he's talking. Seeing them both sort of have that distance even though they're so close visually, I think that works in a completely different way, and it's only because it's animated.
Well, yeah, the effects... The comic-inspired effects really elevate this film to another level, especially, I mean, when they're glitching because they're not in their home dimension. Yeah. I mean, those fractured effects, I mean, you almost feel like you're in pain watching them in pain. Yeah. It made me cringe a lot, but in a good way.
It was such a funny line where he goes, yeah, I have a spider thing too, spider shack. And they go in and they're being lowered. He's like, so pretentious. I'm like, oh my God, it's so nice. And he's like, oh, whatever. Look, he doesn't even have this. Like,
dude, the Spider-Mobile, the spider motorcycle. And all the costumes in there, which some of them were directly pulled from the Spider-Man PS4 game, which was all amazing. And that made the native Spider-Man, the one that got killed off, seemed a little more like Batman with the spider cave. I love that part. And props to Aunt May for just being the best.
Yeah, she was like, it took you long enough.
How come you were earlier talking about like the one criticism that you had, and so I was trying to think of mine, and so and tell me if you guys felt differently, but so it's good to have like the setup and like the payoffs and like they used the phrase from earlier, but to me, when I came out of the movie, like, it seemed like on the back 9 of the movie, every single thing was like a reference to something earlier, and they like beat me over the head with it of like, oh, you said the thing that you said earlier.
Beat me over the head.
That's a very,
but yeah, they do.
So many times.
You
I
just
counted
have to jump.
at
Like,
least
you have
6
to
times,
believe.
dude.
And
Yeah,
the thing
leap
is, though,
of faith.
you mentioned that to me after the film, and you're right. They did mention like, oh, you just need to have faith, and like, you know, and
Yeah,
you need
it's like,
to.
you didn't find that
it'll
kitschy
click
or like
for you.
awkward.
The thing is, that is Spider-Man. You know what I mean? Like, Spider-Man is cliche. Spider-Man makes these dumb jokes as he's jumping around, and at the end, he always like learns a lesson. You know, that's his like, that's his thing. You know,
Today
like,
I learned.
Yeah, I think it works in a very comic book way. It is kitschy, but I think it's good kitschy. You know, and like I said, it's like those setups, like J.J. Abrams, for example, is really good at those setups and payoffs.
One thing the movie that was missing from this movie, he should have been in here.
J.J. Abrams.
Sorry, J. Jonah Jameson. I wanted him to be in this movie somewhere.
Yeah, that would have been awesome.
He was in it at the
Those
very
damn
end. He
spider
goes,
people.
"Who started it? Probably Spider-Man."
Oh yeah,
Like,
the
something like that.
spider scene. Yeah.
And you're just like, oh, okay. I thought that
me
was so
photos of
funny for the
Spider-Man.
memes. They just went for it. But visually, I think the scene where, you know, the reactor is activated and like all the colors are going everywhere. Green
Oh my
Goblin
God, that
pushes
was-
Spider-Man into it. Stuff like that.
Ooh.
It's just insane. Like, it's so
Yeah,
many
it's
colors.
mind-blowing.
And then the scene where Miles is fighting Fisk and like, you know, it's multi-dimensional smashing together.
Oh, that got crazy.
It got really crazy. So you're like, you don't know where to, you know, you're just sitting there. You have no idea what to do with yourself.
And if Miles didn't have, if it were any other hero besides Spider-Man, because let's not forget the spider sense is a common power among all of them. If he didn't have that, you could never orient yourself in that level of chaos and still effectively fight, or let alone get your bearings. So
I liked how the Spider-Man pig women all knew like this. Okay, so they had like the, what's it called?
that's the spider sense. That's their
the
calling
spider
card.
sense,
Yeah.
They knew when it was like they saw another Spider-Man. You know, they kind of made it like a
connection,
link.
yeah.
But
It's
then
their
also they knew when
handshake.
they were in trouble. Like, you know, they're in Aunt May's
spider
house, and all of a
sense,
sudden they
yeah.
all get it, and they're like, "Oh, here we go." You know what I mean?
Dude, that's what keeps them alive more
Yeah.
often than not. I mean, yeah, there are other abilities, but if they didn't have that, they'd be street pizza for a lot of them.
Street pizza.
Street pizza.
Wow.
Street
We
pizza.
should have a whole
That's a Raimi reference. You're
episode
welcome.
on street pizza. I had a friend, I'm not going to say names, she once ate pizza off the street when she dropped it. It was the streets of New York City, which is
Oh
disgusting.
god.
Wait, was she
anyway, I digress.
was she the pizza rat?
That was her.
So Hakkam, you brought up for a brief second Fisk, right? And the thing I really loved about Fisk is the setup and payoff of his character and sort of the false justification for his actions, but then sort of the paradoxical or not paradoxical, but sort of like repeating history thing, where the reason he got in trouble, the reason his family died, is because of him, right? He was attacking Spider-Man, and it wasn't the fact that like some big battle happened and then like a building fell and accidentally landed on his family. It was his own actions and how he was perceived by his family that pushed them away, right? That was the core of it, not just their bodily danger or anything.
Yeah.
So then to not only do like a time traveling thing to justify that, but his own family through dimensions, reprising that same moment in the like dimensional train car where they're at the end fighting. It's like he's holding up another different Spider-Man in the exact same position, and then there are these blurs, images of specters of his family from other dimensions haunting him still in the exact same way, and he's not learned that lesson. He always pushes it and blames Peter Parker for all his problems, except really the problem is rooted in him, and you can't get it through his thick skull, and that is the tragic flaw in him. So
Well, and that's because, Fisk is usually portrayed in, most media, the comics, the animated series, all that, as just a ruthless businessman and villain. He rules New York with an iron grip. And at his core, he will always be that, even if they try to give him some sort of emotional cop-out. It's like, yeah, he's got that human element, but he's willing to destroy all of reality to get back his family. And that is a self-centered, greedy response. Yeah, it's a tragic, he loved them in his own twisted way, but he was willing to let everything else crumble for the sake of it, and he still held on to his hatred for Spider-Man.
it's the fact that the action that he took to bring them back would be actions that they themselves would disapprove of if they were alive, right? So it's this sort of emotional paradox that works completely well in disavowing his course of action, however justified in his head it is,
Doubling
And I
down
did
on
like-
what you said, Justin. Sorry, Brad.
No, it's okay.
it was such a great take on the bad guy has the good guy up against the wall. And instead of, picturing his family or Spider-Man saying like, oh, what would your family think? And like, oh, Fisk finally is a human being.
Yes.
It was
that would've been
it was
bad.
a different dimension. It was another set of his family. It was like, they said they had found how many versions of his family? Like 500? So, it was
Every single one of them
and
so he has no chance.
and Fisk is just like, oh, they think I'm a bad guy because I want to kill Spider-Man, so I'm going to prove them wrong by killing Spider-Man.
You're right.
And it was Liev Schreiber
Yeah.
from Sabretooth
Yeah.
from X-Men, which was such a another great cast for this.
No, he was actually, and that was great, and I loved Fisk's character design. At first, I thought it was a little goofy and didn't match, but he kind of stole every scene that focused on him because he is just like a mountain
It
of a
takes the
human
whole
being.
frame.
His whole shoulders.
And he's gone toe to toe with Spider-Man before, and he's usually fat in the comics and all that, but he is just a pure meat mountain, and he can destroy whatever comes his way.
That's an Arby's
Can we
thing.
quote you on that?
We've got the spiders.
Described by Brad as a meat mountain.
Meat mountain.
That's on the box quote for the DVD.
Starring Meat Mountain Fisk. Also, Spider-Man's in here. Wilson Fisk into the Fiskverse.
Oh no!
It's just
Can you imagine where
trying to
Fisk is
kill
like
Spider-Man with gigantic shoulders? They can't go to a restaurant. They can't sit down.
can go through doors.
Okay, so I say we start winding it down. Any last points you want to get out? Anything else?
Dude,
Must see.
I can't say enough good things about this movie. I was already hyped going into it, but it just really, I'm someone that's familiar with almost like every iteration of Spider-Man, and this still made me feel like, hey, I'm learning something brand freaking new about Spider-Man, and I love it, and I want more of it.
Yeah, same.
Yep. It's pretty much perfect for what it's going for.
Yeah.
And this is going to spawn a whole slew of Spider-Man cosplays at every single con.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
True.
dude.
It's gonna be great.
Look at Instagram, just like follow.
There's gonna be one with a
Spider-Verse.
cape, like that just walks around. Guarantee.
I'm hoping we get like fan art of not only the characters in the movie, but like fans come up with their own
Concepts.
versions of
Yeah.
Spider-Man.
Yeah,
and then
make your
come up
own
with that.
Spidey.
Yeah.
The
I
Spider-Verse
guarantee it's gonna
69
happen.
Spider-Man.
Look at his suit.
All right, well,
I think that's basically, we're all recommending that you go watch it.
You have to.
you must. That's going to be it for episode 58 of the Pop Culture Bento podcast. Thanks for tuning in as always. Hakkam, our esteemed guest, where can people find you on social media?
Zaggy Stardust, actually, that's my handle. I'm pretty funny, I would say. I wonder how many people send my tweets to each other. Because I always wonder that, but I know. My analytics are really good, so I would check it out.
And you can find the rest of our stuff at Pop Culture Bento. You can find me at JRS Terrier. You can find Brad at Bradley McGinn2. You can find Justin at JHRussell94. And from the all of us, enjoy your bento.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.